I believe when it comes to sustainability, the sort of number one lever that we can pull is electoral politics, is politics per song. But certainly when it comes to what we can do often as individual agents, that's going to be, business or voting with your dollar. There are critiques of that, but there is something to the idea of trying to join a community where you're performing your own values. You're eating the way you believe the world can be sustained better. And that your individual action isn't going to stop the climate crisis, but you can do something. So I think there's almost those levels. So if we put aside that level of individual just voting with your dollar choice, which is probably the weakest, and if we put aside the level of politics, which is definitely the strongest, we are left with a lot of day-to-day running a business. And there, I think there's often a false dichotomy between sort of for-profit, nonprofit. And I should say I'm neither a business person nor specifically a researcher who's really just focused on these kinds of questions about business model and sort of return and sustainability within an economic sphere. I'm really interested in labor and questions of how people do their work and what kind of satisfaction they draw from it, how they rationalize to themselves, this is a good job or not, and where they want the world to go, where they want those jobs to go. But I'm not giving business advice in terms of that. But what I see anyway from a wide network of urban ag startups is that it doesn't seem like for-profit and nonprofit is this big conflict. It's sort of like, yeah, nonprofits exist to fulfill some mission, but they may struggle with making a broader impact because they might be relying on grants, on volunteers. So the sort of levers on the day-to-day that they have to press up and down, the buttons that they can press might be fewer. They might not make as big an impact. In our world, in our currently existing world, it may be that for-profit business is that sort of middle level way where someone can go out and sort of make a big difference if they invent a product. If you look at the very clear cases like Apple's iPhone, that was a product that kind of changed how most of us communicate, whether or not we even bought that product, right? We might have bought a version made by another company later, but that product's entry into the market, which of course helped one company a lot and then helped a few other companies a lot as well, changed how we thought about communication. And I'm not saying that that's the only model, but that's certainly, one strategy is let me find a problem that could be solved through a business case, through the development of a product or service that will return money, and let me then try that out, get the capital I need to do that, to bring it to market, and then follow through. And when it comes to that with food, I think there's an enormous opportunity, and you hear it in different sectors. So the United States doesn't have a lot of controlled environment ag total compared to Europe. So there's a lot of opportunity just with greenhouses. When you move to high-tech vertical farming, it's slightly less clear exactly what the opportunity is, but now there seems to be a consensus. There's a big opportunity with high-value leafy greens, herbs, certainly cannabis. And there's now a big, I think, discussion about, well, what about tomatoes, strawberries, cucumbers, just generally vine crops and berries? And then what else? Are there other ways that we can really begin to use this technology to have more total control that does cost a lot more upfront, but might deliver a lot more value? You're looking at big companies, so Corteva, Bayer, Crop Science, moving a lot of research indoors so they can do research on seeds that then they're going to grow in field in bigger numbers, but they can do it in a very controlled way. They can do research on pharmaceuticals indoors with plants, and that these are opportunities that I think in a lot of places are just kind of taking off. So they probably do make some business sense in our currently existing landscape in a profit-driven world. I think for someone in a network in a city, it's probably about that region and that person's interest, whether they want to start a for-profit and are looking at business cases. What is a market that's going to buy a product that I can grow, and it's a good product, it's clean, it tastes good, and I'm delivering it locally, versus what's a nonprofit mission that I want to fulfill. And it may be that the same individuals involved with both, and I've seen that certainly in my work, as people work at both kinds of companies or even sometimes run both. They might even have sort of different units within the same company. And I think this is really what a lot of my research comes down to, is that people who are a little younger or going back into starting their own business, having worked somewhere else, are looking to create a for-profit model that has an ethics to it that's a little bit different. It's not just profit-driven. How exactly that works, when it works, that's sort of up for debate, but I think that's probably a good shift, as opposed to everyone just saying, well, all that really matters in the end is making money. When it comes to food, when it comes to our communities, we have to imagine business differently. And I think that shift is very clear. Everyone I ask sort of says that. And then it becomes a question of, okay, well, what models are working and what models really aren't? What models are essentially just replicating the for-profit old school model of industrial, chemical, agriculture in field, but they're doing it in a city, versus who are people who are really pioneering something that's providing that extra value, and that's closing these loops so that, in terms of production, it's more sustainable, and in terms of social impact, it's more equitable. And I think in general, most people I've met in urban farming are just really committed, and they really believe what they're doing, and they're trying to do essentially the right thing, to put it sort of boldly. And I think with more support, more people can get there.